Good morning. So, when I heard the new theme about picking memorable children's books that we had carried with us since we were little kids and talking about their meaning in our life, one book just kept coming back to me. And it's a very simple children's book. It's Home for a Bunny by Margaret Wise Brown. Much later in life, there was a little confusion in the newsletter that I was going to do this book, The Runaway Bunny, but that actually I didn't discover until I was an adult teaching English. It ran away. So Margaret Wise Brown was a very interesting person, very popular in the 50s. She born in New York, grew up in Connecticut and Massachusetts. She was born in 1910 and died suddenly and tragically at 42 years old in 1952. She had attended boarding school in Europe. She excelled in sports, was known as a tomboy. She loved animals, had lots of pets. She had beagles and collies and cats and various squirrels and, of course, rabbits. She taught for a time at the Bank Street School in New York, which was associated with Columbia University teacher training program, but was very experimental based on the ideas of John Dewey. And she decided fairly quickly that teaching was not her kettle of tea, and she preferred writing. She endeavored to present to kids what she called here and now stories that reflected their daily experience rather than the fanciful princesses and castles and fire-breathing dragons that had been popular in the 30s and 40s. She was part of the LGBTQ community. She had a long-term relationship with a woman named Blanche Ulrich, who was older than her and had been an important suffragette in the struggle for women's voting rights leading to the 19th Amendment earlier in the century. But Blanche Ulrich died, and she later, Margaret Wise Brown, became engaged to James, I believe, Rockefeller Jr., whoever that was, but died before they were ever married of a blood clot in France, and the blood clot was in her leg following an operation for an appendicitis, which was kind of a parallel with my life a year ago, which surprised me. But I had modern medicine on my side. So, when I was in my 20s, 30s, and 40s, as soon as school was out in June, I would take that flight and go visit my mom in Connecticut. My mom lived in the northwest corner of Connecticut, which is very rural, lots of small towns with their town green and their little white congregational church. This is the land of town meetings where you talk about roofing that school, or not, and until 1 in the morning. And firemen's carnivals, because all the fire departments are volunteer, and they all have a little tiny Carnegie library that's made out of stone. It's a land known for dairy farms and corn until very recently. It was farmland. And I would take twilight walks at the end of the day. And my mother lived on a small road that had been paved recently. When I first knew it, there were only about a dozen houses on it. It was quite twisty and went up a hill. It had been the dirt access road to pasture for a family dairy farm. And it still had, animal enclosure fencing and a couple of outbuilding barns and wood piles and stone walls and a big pond that was full of croaking bullfrogs and plopping box turtles. And when you take a walk in the early evening in June, it's bunny time. Those bunnies just dash out of the bushes and they hippity hop and they always zigzag. They're eastern cottontails, and that's what they do, and their little white flag, flagging in the rear, their tail. And then they zip into, some brambles and blackberries next to the road, and then there's another one, and off they go. And they're little, they're fuzzy, they're the youngsters, they're out, and they just leap and cavort, and it looks like they're enjoying the joy of the journey. And they seem completely oblivious to the fact that they might soon be, fox food or a snack for a hawk. But there they are. It's bunny time. So, they must have been inspiration for Margaret Wise Brown's, one of her early bunny books, which was Runaway Bunny, which I will read to you because I thought it related amazingly to the lectionary today. I chose the Common Lectionary. I think it's a good intellectual challenge for me. The Common Lectionary runs through a 3-year cycle, and you read through most of the Bible. And there's two ways to approach Scripture. You can think about something you want to talk about, a theme or a message, and then look for Scripture that speaks to that. Or you can take the Scripture and grapple and wrestle with it and pull out how it relates to what's going on in your life around you. And so the discipline of using the common lectionary is something I like to explore and do. So this is Runaway Bunny. It was published in 1942. Those little bunnies that hippity-hopped and zigzagged down the road seem mischievous and rebellious and disobedient. I mean, how can they worry their poor mother rabbits by being out and about at dusk when the foxes are prowling about? Let's see. Where do I aim so that people at home can see the pictures? It's going to be hard. Is there a way, Roy, to move this up so that our folks at home can see the illustrations a little better? Yeah, that's good. That's perfect. Okay, great. Except that then poor Kevin and Pepe can't.
That's right.
Okay, I think we're good. Once there was a little bunny who wanted to run away. So he said to his mother, "I am running away." "If you run away," said his mother, "I will run after you, for you are my little bunny." I'm going to save it for the good illustrations. "If you run after me," said the little bunny, "I will become a fish in a trout stream, and I will swim away from you." "If you become a fish in a trout stream," said his mother, "I will become a fisherman, and I will fish for you." "Well, if you become a fisherman," said the little bunny, "I will become a rock on a mountain high above you." "If you become a rock on the mountain high above me," said his mother, "I will be a mountain climber, and I will climb to where you are." "If you become a mountain climber," said the little bunny, "I will be a crocus in a hidden garden." "If you become a crocus in a hidden garden," said his mother, "I will be a gardener, and I will find you." And part of the joy of this book is looking for the little bunny. He's in the third tulip. "If you are a gardener and find me," said the little bunny, "I will be a bird and fly away from you." "If you become a bird and fly away from me," said his mother, "I will be a tree that you come home to." "If you become a tree," said the little bunny, "I will become a little sailboat, and I will sail away from you." "If you become a sailboat and sail away from me," said his mother, "I will become the wind and blow you where I want you to go." "If you become the wind and blow me where you want," said the little bunny, "I will join a circus and fly away on the flying trapeze." "If you go flying on the flying trapeze," said his mother, "I will be a tightrope walker, and I will walk across the air to you." "If you become a tightrope walker and walk across the air," said the little bunny, "I will become a little boy and run into a house." "If you become a little boy and run into a house," said the mother bunny, "I will become your mother and catch you in my arms and hug you." This picture foreshadows Goodnight Moon. Yeah. Old lady saying, "Hush." "Shucks," said the little bunny, I might just as well stay where I am and be your little bunny. And so he did. Have a carrot, said the mother bunny. Don't run away. So what struck me about this book is that the guises of Mother Bunny have a certain similarity to the guises of God in the Bible. There's a lot of metaphor there and a lot of creativity, and the love of that mother is constant, unrelenting. It doesn't matter how mischievous and rebellious and disobedient and obnoxious that child is, she still loves him and she still tells him so. There's a wonderful book that's in our children's library by Catherine Patterson, who's another children's author. She tends to write middle school level novels about the Middle Ages. Sign of the Chrysanthemum about Japan is one of them, and Percival about Europe is another one. But she was a devout Presbyterian. She grew up the daughter of missionary parents in China and lived through the travesties and the evacuation of China during the Second World War. She married a clergyman, ended up as a missionary herself in Japan, and they wrote this little book, Images of God. And it's wonderful. It just has 2 or 3 page vignettes, but God is a cloud, appearing in the Old Testament, leading the Hebrews through the desert. God is a mountain in some of the Psalms. God is a parent. God is a hen sheltering her chicks under her wing. That's right after the Sermon on the Mount. And what was the other one that I noticed? God is a fisherman, of course. Jesus fishing for disciples along the shores of Galilee. God doesn't quite become a circus tightrope walker, but God is a wrestler. God wrestles with Jacob all through the night. Finally, the runaway bunny, the prodigal rabbit, does choose to come home. And it's our choice to respond to God's calling. In the end, the bunny has a cozy burrow and a carrot. Part of Jesus' teaching is God is making a place for us. My Father's house has many rooms. So that was a message that I found that a 3-year-old would understand. Reflects the love of a parent. The book that I really chose, where's page 4? Today's Bible reading, Jeremiah reminds us, our God, the God of the Hebrews, is not just a neighborhood deity or something on the family altar that you make obeisance to as you dash off to the olive orchard for the day. It's not some local deity like the Baal of the Canaanites. Our God is universal. Our God goes with us. Our God is omnipresent, with us in our sorrows and in our triumphs. It doesn't matter. The Hebrews sojourned and were in Egypt. It doesn't matter if they were in Babylon or Assyria or Persia or Rome. Their God and their culture was with us, and that allowed them to persevere as a people and to continue on till now. Why was I drawn to this book? This is the one I remember. And in my mind, my book was a lot bigger. It was giant. On warm summer evenings, my grandmother or my mother would read me this in a rocking chair, like this. And I was fascinated. I loved this book for several years. I liked the pictures. They're so fuzzy and touchable. I liked the rhythm and the rhyme of it, and I liked the funny voices that my mom and my grandma would make. They were very fortunate. My mother was trained as a nursery school teacher and religious educator. My grandmother taught first grade for years. You started as a teacher when you were 18 or 19 in those days. So, yeah, long time. And they were fortunate. They had a cousin who was a librarian during the Depression and World War II. So they had access to use children's books, which most people didn't have in the 30s and 40s. This book was written in 1954, published posthumously by the estate of Margaret Wise Brown. Spring, 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 sang the robin. Spring, 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 sang the frog. Spring, said the groundhog. It was spring. The leaves burst out, the flowers burst out, and the robins burst out of their eggs. It was spring. In the spring, a bunny came down the road. He was going to find a home of his own, a home for a bunny, a home of his own, under a rock, under a stone, under a log, or under the ground. Where would a bunny find a home? Where is your home? He asked the robin. Here, 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 sang the robin, and the robin's cry really is like that. Here in this nest is my home. Here, 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 sang the little robins, who were about to fall out of the nest. Here is our home. Oh, not for me, said the bunny. I would fall out of a nest. I would fall to the ground. So he went on, looking for a home. Where is your home? He asked the frog. Wog, 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 sang the frog. Wog, 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 under the water down in the bog. Oh, not for me, said the bunny. I would drown down in a bog. So he went on, looking for a home. Where do you live? He asked the groundhog. In a log, said the groundhog. Can I come in? Said the bunny. No, you can't come in my log, said the groundhog. So the bunny went down the road. Down the road and down the road he went. He was going to find a home of his own. A home for a bunny, a home of his own, under a rock or a log or a stone. Where would a bunny find a home? Down the road and down the road and down the road he went until he met a bunny. Where is your home? He asked the bunny. Here, said the bunny, here under this stone, under this rock, down underground. Here is my home. Can I come in? Asked the bunny. Yes, said the bunny. And so he did. And there was his home. So I was drawn to Home for a Bunny, I think, because it lets you know that you'll be able to make your way in the world. You know, this little bunny, there's no mama bunny in that story. There's no home burrow. There's no family of origin. But I think it's reassuring that, and it let me know as a child that even if you're lost from your parents or your home burrow, there'll be a place in the world. There's a place where you'll find a place where you're appreciated, where you belong, and where you can be loved. The New Testament reading in Paul's, well, it's not Paul's, purportedly Paul's, but in the letter to the Hebrews is how it appears in the Bible, and we don't know who wrote it, but as Roy pointed out, the Greek is very different from Paul's other epistles to the Corinthians and the Galatians and the Thessalonians and Timothy and all those guys that we are pretty sure were written by St. Paul. The Greek is very different. It has a different level of syntax, and it's more literary, and it has vocabulary that Paul doesn't use anyplace else. So we think it was written maybe by a disciple of Paul or student of Paul. It's directed at a Jewish audience, perhaps a community of early Jesus movement people in Jerusalem. And it doesn't talk about the juxtaposition of Gentiles and Jews the way the rest of Paul's work does. It doesn't talk about slave and free. Slaves in those days would have been, in Rome, would have been a lot of Greek people. It's different. But it's got a lot of good theology and a lot of interesting visions and metaphors, and it became canon. And it does agree with a lot of Paul's points of view. So this passage in chapter 11 is all about faith. By faith Abel had a better offering than Cain, and by faith Abraham came to a new land, and by faith Abraham offered his son Isaac in sacrifice, and by faith Moses was hidden in the bushes or the rushes by the river, and by faith the Hebrews crossed the Red Sea, and by faith Jericho's walls fell, and Solomon and Saul and David and all these other guys I hadn't heard of. It was like Hebrews 101. It's a whole rehearsal of the history of the Hebrew people. John Calvin would have loved it, by faith. But John Calvin is famous for by faith alone we are saved. But it's a reminder to this Hebrew congregation or community that God has always been on their side, mostly. And then there's that stunning metaphor at the end. You're surrounded by a cloud of witnesses. All of history looks down and is around you, your people from the past. Like God led the Hebrews by a cloud by day through the Sinai desert. And God surrounded Mount Horeb with cloud when Moses went up to receive the commandments. So who are these witnesses? Are they angels? Are they neighbors peering out the back window and over the fence? Are they our friends and family who know us so well? Are they strangers? Are they parts of God's self? Doesn't really say, but the clear message is you are not alone. Bunny had a cloud of witnesses. He had all those woodland creatures, the robin and the frog and the groundhog, and they all knew he was looking for a home. And frog and robin seem somewhat amenable to him visiting their homes, but Bunny is pretty wise and knows that a nest and a bog are not good homes for him. Groundhog has either got up on the wrong side of bed or just knows that it just wouldn't work. But they all know that he's looking for a home. And then Bunny finds a bunny, like himself. But are they really alike? As a bigger kid, I was fascinated by the last picture because they're different. One has brown fur and dark eyes, and one has white fur and red eyes. They have different fur color. Now, Arctic whitehares and domestic laboratory rabbits are not the same species as eastern cottontails. But I've wondered, was Margaret Wise Brown transmitting a subliminal message? I mean, this was published in 1954. That's exactly 2 years after that momentous court decision of Brown versus the board that outlawed, that outlawed school segregation and mandated that it be ended with all due haste. It's only 1 year after the successful bus boycott in Montgomery, where Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks burst onto the national consciousness, and the civil rights movement became something national. Is she commenting on the foment and turmoil of the day? But then I remember, no, she died in 1952. This was published posthumously by her estate. But wait. She didn't draw the pictures. Garth Williams is the illustrator. Garth Williams was a rather famous and beloved illustrator. He illustrated Stuart Little and The Cricket in Times Square, which were the wonderful literature of the post-war 1940s. He illustrated Charlotte's Web, beloved to this day. He illustrated the Little House on the Prairie books, Marilyn. And more recently he illustrated Bedtime for Francis, that little groundhog that's so petable. Yeah. He illustrated. Was he making a statement? I don't know. And interestingly, there's another bunny book. And this one did become controversial. This is Garth Williams himself. It's a very prosaic princess lived ever happily after story. I'm not going to read it to you, but there's a little black bunny in the woods and a little white bunny, and they like to play. And little black bunny is sad, and little white bunny asks why. And he says, I'm just thinking. And then they play hide and go seek and leap the daisies, and it goes on. And little black bunny is sad. Why are you sad? I'm just thinking. And finally, little black bunny confesses to his little pal that he really would like to spend the rest of his life with her. She's a girl by. And so they make a pact and they make an agreement that they're going to get married. Forever and always. And they put marigolds in their ears and the other bunnies dance around and celebrate. And all the woodland creatures come to watch the festivities. And they live happily ever after. So, Garth Williams, being the well-known illustrator that he was, school librarians and public librarians all over the country bought this book. And down in Alabama, which the capital is Montgomery, right? There was a state senator who became rather upset about this. And the White Citizens Council got involved. Now, the White Citizens Council were the people who organized against Dr. King and the Montgomery Improvement Association when they had the bus boycott. They were basically a bunch of Klansmen minus the costume, scrubbed up, we're a civic improvement association. So the White Citizens Council got involved and they lobbied the state legislature, and the state legislature passed a law banning this book. Oh, first they handed it to the state librarian. State librarian was a woman. She went through and said, I don't see any problem with it. They are, after all, rabbits. But the legislature in Alabama banned this book and mandated it removed from public library and school shelves and put in a special section, and kids have to have permission from their parents to read it and so forth and so on. So this book and Garth Williams got into good trouble. Interesting. So the last stories I just want to remember quickly are the stories of College Heights. There are many, but Jane Hazlett and I have recently been visiting the Wilkinsons, Bob and May Blossom. You may have seen the little article in this week's newsletter. They live across the complex from Lois Brock at Sterling Court. And Blossom is 100 and Bob is 96. They were active in this church in the 60s and 70s when their children were young. Bob is Caucasian. He's white. May Blossom is Chinese American, born and raised in Hawaii and Cantonese speaking. And they married in 1950. Congregational minister married them. And that minister said to them, "Aren't you lucky? California's anti-miscegenation law was just repealed 3 years ago in 1947. Bob told me that the other day. Yeah. And they had their 4 kids, and their 4 kids were in the youth group with my dad and mom and other leaders. Sue Lynn was the one closest to me in age. We overlapped at high school by maybe 3 years difference or 2 years difference. But I remember her plopping down next to me and commenting on our schedule and then saying, people don't know what to make of me. They don't know if I'm Asian or white or what I am. I'm just a coconut. I'm brown and white both. But Bob and May Blossom lived a long, long, long happy life together and raised 4 great kids. And they were part of our church and part of our being and our fabric back when white folks just didn't marry Chinese folks. The other story I remember is one that was told to us by Bruce Bishop and also Jerry Brock. If you went to Bruce Bishop's memorial, a man named Milt Williams sung Amazing Grace. And Milt Williams is African American. He was a choir master at Stanford and I think a professor. And his wife was white. And they were part of this church also in the 60s. And they were trying to buy a house on the west side of San Mateo. And they went to open houses and they talked to realtors and they made offers. And always there was a problem. Their paperwork didn't arrive, or there'd been a better offer, or the house was taken off the market. They couldn't buy a house on the west side of San Mateo. And it was because of the CCRs that were on a lot of properties. And to this day, some of them they're not enforceable anymore. But there's still CCRs on properties in the west side of San Mateo that prohibit selling to people of other races. And finally, our first minister, Vern Henderson, and his wife, Kiki, said, you've got bank accounts, you've got a steady job, you have a good income at Stanford, let us take your papers to a house that you're interested in and make an offer. And they did. And this was after the fair housing law was passed in California, I believe in 1964. I know my parents did precinct walking and telephone calling for that law. The Fair Housing Act in California was a year before the National Fair Housing Act in 65, I believe. That offer was accepted when presented by Vern and Kiki Henderson, who were white. And then Vern said, and now you need to meet the real Mr. and Mrs. Williams. They're waiting in a car outside. Let me bring them in. But because the tentative offer had already been signed, they couldn't retract it because we had a new Fair Housing Act. And they got that house. And it was down here on 23rd or 24th, right near 25th Avenue. And they were part of our church. And our minister and his wife did that bold act of defiance in a way to help that house be bought. So these are the stories we tell. My grandmother, my mother, my father, books of Margaret Wise Brown and others that taught me that you can go out into the world, there'll be a place for you, you can go out with creativity, with confidence, with courage. You'll find a home, a place where you'll be appreciated, a place where you belong, a place where you will be loved. The writers of our Bible assure us that God is with us wherever we go. God witnesses our woes and our triumphs. God is in the people we meet, surrounding us like a cloud. And College Heights stories remind us that we can stand by people who are struggling with injustice, and we can stand up to demand equality, respect. Those are the stories that I wanted to share with you today. Are there any comments or questions? Yes?